entered, I really got involved in volunteerism, helping people, community action, I suppose, when I was real young. Entered 4-H when I was 9 years old, served almost all the time that you're allowed to serve as a 4-H'er, and just really found a love of helping people. And as I went to college and went through my graduate programs, I suppose that love and those early lessons stuck with me in a lot of ways. And when I stumbled on this idea of past education, work, and mental health and how it affects the selection of volunteer positions, I really dug into the research. And I don't think a book was ever, it was never a forefront of anything until I was basically told by another author that I needed to go ahead and write the book. And so once I did it, it became really comfortable, and I think it started a really great journey of future work and changing the way we look at volunteerism. I always wrote. I remember in first grade, probably even the first day of school, being told that we were going to do daily journals, and they're hilarious to look back on. I mean, I was always very busy today. That was a primary theme in the writing, and as a first grader, to do that, it really didn't make sense then. And it really has been in the last couple of years that I realized how important that was. And then going into third grade, really through middle school, writing for what used to be called the Young Writers Conference, Writers in the Middle workshops that used to happen in southern Iowa. It was really meaningful, and there was a lot of joy there. And so when it came to academic papers, it was a different feel. And so now writing is just something that I really can just do every day. It really removed a lot of that dread, and as I've learned through the process of the book, to write something every day. And I don't mean like an email or a text message. I mean to actually sit down with a pen and paper or with a document and write a paragraph or two, even if it's not related to something you're doing. It's really meaningful. So when I entered the PhD program at Capella University, the PhD in Public Service Leadership and Nonprofit Management, there's three, because it's an online program, you're required to attend 3 colloquia. And a colloquia literally translates to informal meeting, is what it translates to. And so you go down and you learn about various academic topics, and it's very academically focused in this, but it is very informal. It's a lot of open discussion in these things. And first colloquia in Dallas, we walk in, we sit down, group leader comes up and he says, okay, and literally first question out of his mouth, second semester student here, what's your dissertation topic? And I looked at him and I said, we are 3 years from this. And he said, no, you need to decide now, and you're going to go back to your hotel tonight and you're going to write an outline. So I thought, okay, like I said, I was involved in 4-H. I was involved in the teen center in Creston, and actually all the Union County teen centers. I was on the board as a high school student. And I thought, okay, let's talk about how teens select volunteer positions. And I thought, this is great. And I found a bunch of research to support the idea. And I showed it to the guy leading the group, Dr. William Dish, and he said, he said, this is great, and I know somebody that can help you out. And we had also selected some mentor bios, some folks that we were interested in talking to. And one of those gals was there, and so I showed her the topic, and she said, here's the thing, great topic, but if you ever want to graduate, don't study youth. And she said, the reason you don't study youth as a student is because they're what's called a protected population, and there's all sorts of paperwork and red tape you have to jump through. And she said, if you want to study youth, she said, do it after you graduate, but get your degree, and so study seniors. And I said, oh man, this is not, I don't want to study seniors. I mean, I love older people. That's not the problem. Right now, I have the passion for it. And she said, do that. So I started reading, and I found a passion for it. I really didn't choose to study at Capella. I think Capella chose me to study there. When I graduated from Regis with my master's, Regis University, and they're in their online program, my mentor told me, he said, you need to get your PhD, and you will. And there was some resistance, and I didn't want to do it. So I sat around for a couple of years and did some other things, including starting my own nonprofit. And all of a sudden, for whatever reason, a couple of years later, I started getting mail and phone calls from Capella, just really out of the blue. And at that point, I kind of looked at another couple schools, started thinking about it, and Capella just would not leave me alone. And they finally came with an offer of some scholarship and a couple other things, and I said, well, there really must be a reason why I'm supposed to be at Capella. So I relented, essentially, and I just said, okay, you guys want me this bad, you want me to be a student with you for some reason, and fine, let's do it and see what happens. Yeah, so the book took about 3 years, and like I said, so the book's based on the dissertation, and the dissertation was published in 2014. But I didn't immediately go into the book because, like I said, I didn't want to do it. And so it was probably 2015, maybe, mid-2015, when I was at a conference and somebody said, you've got to write the book, you got to do it. And I remember coming home on the train from I think we were in Illinois, and wrote the outline for the book. And so it took about 3 years. But it took 3 years because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to write a book. I knew nothing about publishing. I started off writing not having an editor, and basically had the book written in maybe just under a year, and just hated it, and I was going to throw it out. And one of the writers, Gretchen Rubin, who wrote The Happiness Project, she said something in an email to me, and she said, never throw anything away. And so I didn't. I duplicated the file, I deleted a couple of things, and I basically started over and did it. And so 3 years total because of all the learning, and it's really what it was, one big learning experience. The book really takes the way our country and our society has looked at volunteer recruitment and management. We've really looked at recruitment and management the same way for 50 to 75 years, and the book really tips that on its ear and says, instead of just asking people what they want to do, let's look at specifically education, work, and mental health. Mental health from a quality of life and a happiness standpoint. And instead of just saying, here's a position, do you want to do it? Let's put all these skills together and pull out some specific things from that person's life and say, okay, here are some things that you would be really good at that we think you'd be happy in, or something that a lot of nonprofits are not good at is saying, okay, we don't have a specific job description that meets what you want, so let's create it. Nonprofits are terrible at that. But by being more open-minded, they can create some great things. So that's one thing that really comes from the book that I want people to gain. But the other thing is, as I wrote and researched, I realized that the way that different generations look at volunteerism could be very different. So this had never come up, and so I started to read. I started with the greatest generation. I started with the baby boomers, the generations that I was really comfortable with. and learned there were some differences, and then started to look at millennials, which I'm an old millennial, and really started to see some differences, and talked about those, and then I found what we call Generation Alpha, which is our kids that are just getting ready to turn 10 years old. And I wrote a whole chapter on them because I realized that if we as adults, and even young millennials, Gen Zs, if we don't start to listen to alphas, we're going to have a huge problem, because they are doing stuff now at even as young as 4 years old. They tell a story in the book about a 4-year-old boy that wanted to feed the homeless and did it. So that's the other big takeaway. Really, I thought a lot about this, actually. It really targets, probably somebody that's 14 or 15 years old and up. If you're 14 or 15 reading the book, I think there's going to be a little bit of a bigger learning curve, just because there is some highly academic stuff in there. We talk about the theory of planned behavior, we talk about the model, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, those are things that at 14, 15 years old you probably haven't heard of. But then again, there are adults that don't know about those things. So it really could run the other way. But 15 years old and up, great, take it. And that's why I wrote about the different generations, is I want people of all ages to take it and apply it to their lives, apply it to their generation. I didn't, actually. I didn't think it was important at first. The mental health piece came up in the dissertation research, and I really tried to get rid of it, right? I didn't want to talk about mental health, because mental health, by traditional definition, means that you're mentally ill. It means that you're sick and that there's something wrong with you. And so I tried to get rid of it, but was essentially told that I needed to create a social science definition. And so that's what I did, and so that's when it did come into the book, and I did want to talk about it. But at the onset, I didn't want it there. But it really turned out to be central to the book, and it really turned out to be central to kind of my next steps, even as an author.